Hello, everybody. Charles from GMAT Ninja here. Welcome to episode number 6 of our Ask Me Anything About the GMAT series. Today, we're going to focus on reading comprehension. As always, we're filming this live. If you are watching this live and you have questions about reading comprehension, please toss them into the chat. I'm going to keep a really close eye on that. You guys were absolutely awesome in episode 5. It took me totally off my plan. I loved it. Spent about 45 minutes just answering questions. Hey, guys, that's what this is for. So if you're watching live, you have questions about reading comp, fire away. If you are not watching this live, I actually have no idea what's going to happen in the next hour. I've got a couple of, I think, challenging reading comprehension, definitely challenging reading comprehension passages teed up. If we have enough general questions, we may or may not get to both of them. We might get to one. We might get to none. I'm not sure what's going to happen. That's the joy of doing a live stream. I will say this, the two I have picked out, I think are kind of exemplify some of the most common challenges within reading comprehension. With that, we've compiled questions you guys have asked all over the forum at GMAT Club, all over YouTube. Here they are. How about more of these and less of me? Okay, so I've got 6 questions that I think are probably the most frequently asked things. I'm not going to read you through all 6 of them. I want to start with the first 3 alone for now. Because they kind of boil down to the same thing, right? I swear I'm good at reading. Why do I still struggle on GMAT reading comprehension? How long should I spend reading the passage? When should I skim? When do I accelerate? When do I slow down? And how often do I look back at the passage? I would argue that these are all kind of the same thing. And here's what I mean. Holy grail on reading comprehension. So let's assume that you're a good reader. Let's assume that you're good at deciphering the meaning of a sentence, a paragraph, a passage. Fundamentally, you're not reading sentences and going, I have no idea what that said, or at least not very often. So why do you still struggle? Generally, the issue is that you're either overreading or underreading. Obviously, this is a massive oversimplification of the many, many things that people can do on reading comprehension, undermine themselves. But the essence is overreading. You might just be focusing on every little detail and going fact, 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 fact. And then they ask you a big picture question. You're like, I don't know. I just read 30 facts. My brain's about to explode. I've spent an eternity. I don't know what it all adds up to. You're not thinking. You're just absorbing tons of details and spending too long doing it. That's overreading. Underreading, I mean, an obvious version of it is skimming. That's why it's a terrible idea. If you try to skim, how do you know what parts of the passage are important and which ones aren't? There's no way to know. So you can't skim. You have to be really, really consistent in how you read. You have to be really consistent in your pacing, really consistent in your focus. Assuming that we do go through a couple passages today, I'll illustrate the best way to do that with these passages I've picked out. But when I say part of what goes wrong when you underread is you're not focusing enough on the big picture. And the thing you always want to do is go, okay, I'm going to stop at the end of every paragraph and go, why? What does the author want from me? The author wants something from you. The author's trying to do something. Is the author trying to convince you of something? Is the author saying, hey, here's a disagreement in some field between 2 commentators, and I'm going to come in with an opinion on it? Am I going to present new information that changes things? That's the way you want to think. You want to think in terms of big picture. Why is the author writing this? Whose points of view are represented? And if you're too sucked into fact, all the details, you're going to miss the big picture, get yourself into all kinds of trouble, miss a lot of questions that aren't necessarily hard. And if you're skimming through, you're also going to miss that big picture, and that's going to get you into trouble. So the essence here on these first 2 questions up there, yeah, generally, the reason you're not doing well on reading comprehension, despite being good at reading, the most common thing by far is going to be that you're overreading, you're underreading, you're focusing on details at the expense of the big picture, or you're just kind of rushing through parts of it and missing what the author's saying. Those are the 2 most common things. Okay, and we will get into other things that pop up as we go through a couple passages today, or at least one passage, time permitting. How long should you spend reading the passage? Look, guys, I hear the question all the time. Oh, I'm going to spend 3 minutes reading the passage and 1 minute per question. There's all these little gimmicks out there. Ignore them, ignore them, ignore them. Reading comprehension passages are in different lengths. There is no point in starting to look at the questions until you've understood how that passage is organized, how the author is constructing their argument, why they've written each paragraph. You can't shortcut that. So if you walk in and say, well, hey, every time I'm going to spend 2 minutes and 45 seconds reading the passage, you're just going to do all the things you shouldn't do. Overread, underread, misunderstand the passage. And it might sound like going quickly through the passage saves you time. It 100% does not. And that brings us to question 3. So what happens if you do not properly read that passage? You get to the questions and you're going to refer back to the passage over and over again. You're starting to look through the passage for things you need. Number one, not effective. You're not going to be accurate. Number two, it's going to be really slow. So people feel like timing on reading comprehension goes to die when you are spending too long reading the passage initially. Not true. Where the time really goes to die is when you read the passage badly, and then you get to your questions and you're back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, looking for things you should have understood the first time. And now it's going to take you a very long time to hunt for them as you do the questions. So is it okay to look back at the passage? Absolutely. Absolutely. Not a problem. I do it all the time. But I know what I'm looking for. I know where it is. It's verification. I'm not looking back at the passage to understand anything for the first time. I'm just making sure that what I think I saw was really there, and that's it. So what you want is a good, strong first read of the passage. Make sure you understand the big picture. Why did the author write this? What points of view are represented? How is this argument put together? How do these paragraphs fit together? And if you do that, when you get to the questions, whether they're primary purpose questions, what is the role of this paragraph? What is the role of this sentence? What is somebody's point of view? Detail, inference, whatever. Doesn't matter the question type. You are going to be much more efficient, much more effective if that initial read is strong and anchored in the organization of the passage. Okay. And then once you do that, again, looking back at the passage, totally fine, normal, good. But if you're doing it a ton, it might be a sign that you didn't read the passage as well as you could have. Okay. Once again, if you guys are watching this live, please fire away if you have general questions. I've got a few more on here. I will rip through those because those are things that get asked all the time on the forum. And then if live group, if you guys don't have more questions to add on, we'll hop into a passage. Got one about amphibians and one about early feminists in 17th century England. One of those probably sounds more interesting to you than the other. I think they both have some qualities that are interesting. So if you're watching live and you have a request, whether you want to talk about frogs or feminism, you let me know. All right. Question 4. Can usually get it down to 2 answer choices, then I pick the wrong one. Hey, that means I'm close. No. Usually when that happens. So is it possible that you're misreading an answer choice? Yeah, that can happen occasionally. But I'd say 70, 80, 90% of the time, if the feeling you have is that, hey, I'm always down to 2 and I picked the wrong one, 2 ways to think about that. One is that that's kind of almost always how it's going to go. When you think about these poor people writing these test questions, very, very frequently, they're going to come up with, hey, here's the right answer. Here's a very delicious, distracting wrong answer. They might not have other delicious, tempting wrong answers. Usually there's only one really, really good wrong answer in there. So often it's just easy to eliminate 3, even if you didn't have a great understanding of the passage. So first answer to this question is, yeah, a lot of the time, this is just how it goes because there's only one really tempting wrong answer. Answer number 2, 70, 80, 90% of the time, it's not the answer choices really. It's that you misunderstood something in the passage. And it was something about your initial reading of the passage where you hadn't fully grasped something, some nuance of what the author was saying. And I would say the same thing on critical reasoning, by the way. And it's not so much that those 2 answer choices are indistinguishable, because they aren't. It's just you can't figure out why one is right and one is wrong. And that's probably something in the passage that you didn't quite catch. So it's really not sexy, but this doesn't necessarily mean that you're all that close, unfortunately. I guess it's better than being totally obliterated and having no idea how to eliminate anything. But more often than not, any question you miss, you will be down to 2 most of the time. So this doesn't mean as much as it sounds like it means, unfortunately. This is just what's going to happen. And it's probably a sign. Usually the culprit is your understanding of the passage, not some nuance of the answer choices. Okay. Question 5. And boy, live group, you guys are quiet. I'm a little worried that there's a glitch here because I'm not seeing any comments at all here. So somebody watching live, please say hello so that I know that you guys are alive. Question 5, should I drill specific passage types, science, humanities? Kind of keeping with what I was saying on those other few questions. Awesome. Glad you guys are here. Thank you for the comments. And if you guys have more questions other than the 6 on here, fire away. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Glad to know that you're here. Good to see some familiar names, some familiar avatars. Great to see you guys. So here's the thing. No specific knowledge of any field is required of you at all on reading comprehension. So if you feel like you're weak on, let's say, science passages, to be honest, that's mostly psychological. It might be about your comfort, but there is no such thing as a science passage that requires you to know anything really about science. Everything you need to know will be in the passage. In some cases, actually knowing a lot about science can hurt you because sometimes you don't read well enough and you kind of assume that you know where it's going when you don't. So usually when I see somebody who is disproportionately struggling on a certain passage type, humanities, business, economics, literature, science, whatever it might be, a couple of things can happen. One is they'll say, oh, I'm off of these science passages. And then I look at their data and they're not. They feel uncomfortable, but they're not actually bad at them. Sometimes it's actually the opposite. Oh, I'm great at these business and economics passages, but these science passages really crush me. I often see students, the students who work with private tutoring, goes the other way. They say, I'm great at econ and business, no problem. Then why are you missing those at twice the rate as science passages? And often it's because you become complacent. Hey, I know this topic. I like this topic. Your brain's thinking about the topic because you already know something about it, and you're kind of away from the passage. And sometimes the thing that they're less comfortable with, they do better. Why? On the thing that they're less comfortable with, they're being disciplined. Read every paragraph, stop and say, why did the author write this? What points of view are represented? How does this paragraph connect to the previous paragraphs? That's all stuff we'll model in a minute. All things that you see in all of my videos about reading comp, we'll do some of that in a moment. So bottom line here is there is no specific knowledge of humanities, literature, business, science, anything that you need. If you're struggling disproportionately on something, it's usually psychological. And most importantly, if your process is 100% consistent, you apply it every single time, regardless of the topic, you should have very even results across those topics. And if you don't, it's mostly psychological. Now, I just dodged the question a little bit. Should you drill certain passage types if you struggle on them? If it makes you more comfortable, by all means. If you think you're bad at science passages or humanities passages, and you think you'd feel better doing more of them, do more of them. But it really has nothing to do with the content. It's all psychology, comfort, and most importantly, making sure you do the same thing every time, regardless of the topic. Okay, last question. I don't like this one, just because the answer is unsatisfying. And thank you for anybody who asked us this before. I've been asked this many, many times. Hey, I'm getting my butt kicked. I read this and it's just unfamiliar, makes me unhappy. I really struggle. I don't understand the sentences. I don't understand the paragraphs. Yeah, that's a tough one. We see less of it now than we did 10 years ago. Most of you taking the GMAT now. Internet's a very different place than it was 10 or 15 years ago. Non-native speakers we meet now, your English is way better than the non-native speaking MBA applicants of 10 or 15 years ago. So I don't actually meet that many people anymore whose reading is that bad. Most of you guys are actually perfectly strong at reading. And if you're struggling on reading comprehension, it's something else, right? It's something about your process. But if you are really struggling to understand the language, it takes a long time to get better at reading. And depending on your background, non-native speaker maybe will make it harder for you. If you've mostly had technical training, haven't read a lot growing up, yeah, you might need 6 months or a year to get better at reading. And if that's the case for you, that's okay. I just want you to be honest with yourself. If you're reading these passages and going, well, I can't make sense of this, yeah, just buckle in for a long haul. Maybe 6 months, maybe a year, reading an hour or two a day of good hard materials might be the way to do it. And it takes time. So if you are in this situation, be patient with yourself because it does take time. All right, that's enough of those general questions. All right. I'm not seeing anything coming out of from the guys watching live. If you guys have anything, fire away at any point. I will answer anything you guys ask. This isn't Ask Me Anything. With that, I think since we're not getting a lot of extra questions, I think we hop into, I've got 2 passages. One has 4 paragraphs. It's about amphibians, frogs, basically. One that's 2 paragraphs. It's about early feminism. I'm tempted to tackle the longer one, the amphibian passage, specifically because I don't think it feels inaccessible. I think you can read a passage on 17th century feminists and go, what? And it feels really foreign. This thing on frogs, like, easy to read. But it has all the elements that can make reading comprehension hard. So let's start with frogs. Here's what I'm going to do. 4 paragraphs. If you've watched any of my other videos on reading comprehension here at GMAT Club, over there on the GMAT Ninja channel, I always advocate stop at the end of every paragraph and think why. See if you can come up with an 8 to 12 word summary of why the author wrote it. What's the author's, not necessarily what's the author's point, but why is the author making that point? Sometimes that's hard to find. Maybe the author's presenting other people's points of view, so fight for that. Bottom line, you're fighting for why. You're fighting to understand points of view, especially if there are multiple points of view. I want you to focus on that. See if you can get to a clean 8 to 12 word summary. So I'm going to give you one paragraph at a time. I'll try to keep this moving along as best I can. So go ahead and take a look at this first paragraph. Think about why do you think the author wrote it? What's the author trying to do? What points of view are represented? And then we'll come back, talk about that paragraph, and then move on to the second one. Have at it, guys. And I will move that logo out of your way. Hold on just a moment. Live group, as soon as you have a little summary or a little thought on why this is here, what the points of view are, please toss it into the chat. All right, as always, if you need a little more time, feel free to hit that pause button. Okay. Yeah, and thank you, live group. Keep firing away at kind of what your thoughts are on what's really going on here. And again, what's really hard sometimes about reading comprehension, and I'm going to assume that everybody watching this, I realize this is not literally a correct assumption. I'm assuming you're a good reader. I'm assuming that nobody here is going to have a problem with the language exactly. Some of you will, and that's okay. But I'm going to aim all this at people who read this and go, yeah, I understand these sentences, no problem. Why might you still struggle on this passage? A lot of it might be that you're oversimplifying what the author is saying, and what you always want to fight for again is why. Why did the author write this? You want to kind of think in terms of is the author trying to convince you of something, trying to adjudicate a discussion, something like that. And a good way to anchor yourself is to think, okay, whose points of view are represented here? And yeah, this is really fun. Thank you for the live group. Keep firing away with your thoughts on this because it's actually really, really helpful to see. I'm saying some really interesting stuff there. You don't want to pick out a fact, even if you think it's a key fact. Instead, you want to think, okay, who's thinking what here? In this case, I would argue that I'm always very interested in what the author thinks. It's not totally obvious right away, but we do have these environmentalists, right? What are the environmentalists saying? Well, the environmentalists are saying that there's a crisis. There's an amphibian crisis. And they're saying that it's an indicator of general, so look at that very last sentence, of general and catastrophic environmental degradation due to human activity. Okay. So again, trying to abbreviate this as much as I can for the sake of not boring you with watching me write. Indicator of, what word already here is general and catastrophic environmental degradation due to human activity of, we'll say, general environmental degradation. Okay, fine. Easy enough. What do you think the author thinks? I don't want you moving away from this paragraph before you think, what's the author thinking? We don't know exactly. The author isn't explicit yet, but notice a couple of things in the language. So look at that third line. these declines, I'm not sure if I'm pointing in the right place. These declines, if real, okay, wait, there's drastic declines in the population, if real, okay, there's some skepticism there. Even that first line, apparently drastic declines, signs of it if real. And then many environmentalists have claimed all of these things. Is the author skeptical? Maybe. I don't know. I can't conclude that yet. But this is how I want you to think. What is the author setting up for us? Hey, the environmentalists think this. Okay, fine. What's the author think? I don't know, but is the author maybe skeptical? Maybe? I don't know. But this is how I want you fighting for the author's purpose. Even if we're not sure of it, that's how I want you to think. It's going to set up everything that comes later. Now, quick thing I get questions on all the time. How much notes should you take? What I'm going to model on here is something like 8 to 12 words. Note taking is an individual thing. If it helps you to write more, write more. If it helps you to write nothing. That's fine. But I want you to think this way. That's what I want to model here. Okay. And you guys, live group, keep this coming. This is awesome. Keep firing away. Stream of consciousness. Tell me what you're thinking of the passage as we go through. All right. Going to add one more paragraph on. So read that paragraph. We're going to do the same exercise. What do you think is really going on here in terms of the author's point of view, other people's point of view? Why is the author writing this? Just as importantly, how does it connect to the first paragraph? Go ahead and give you a couple minutes on this one. Give you a few more seconds. Live group, fire with whatever you're thinking. All right, if you're not watching live, need a couple more minutes, feel free to hit the pause button. Yeah, and live group, thank you. I'm seeing some really cool stuff coming through here. And I might pick on, with all the love in the world, I might pick on a couple of things that you guys are saying and pop them on the screen, because I'm seeing some misconceptions a little bit that I think are really interesting. Before I do that, now we're starting to get the author's thinking, right? And the author's basically saying, I think I might, yeah, I'll leave it this size. And apologies for the small fonts. I'm not sure what else to do to get everything on the screen at the same time. To evaluate these claims, that first sentence, it kind of captures the essence of what the author's going after. To evaluate these claims, useful to make a preliminary distinction that's too often ignored. Okay. So the author's saying, we want to evaluate these claims. Which claims? Well, these claims, right? So the environmentalist claims that this is general environmental degradation due to human activity. Environmentalists are saying humans are killing the amphibians. So, okay, wait, the author's saying, wait. If we want to evaluate those claims, we need to make an often ignored distinction. And that's between declining versus endangered. And that those should not be confused. Why? Essentially, what the author goes on to say is, yeah, so once the population gets low enough, then chance events can play a role. It's not necessarily general degradation. So random factors, so extinction due to random factors sometimes depends on population size. It's independent of the prevailing direction of that size. So you can have animals go extinct and it has nothing to do with general decline, saying that that is something that is totally possible, can happen by chance. And you need to make a distinction between an overall decline, if you're going to talk about overall environmental decline, and extinctions that are due to random events. Okay, pretty interesting. So the author, again, you don't want to oversimplify here. Is the author skeptical and saying the environmentalists are wrong? No. The author's saying, if we want to evaluate these claims, here's how we need to think. Interesting. Now, I'm going to pick on a couple of you with all the love in the world because I am very, very grateful for everybody that puts themselves out there watching a live broadcast and allows me to put their comments on the screen. I'm going to do that, and I am super grateful to anybody who is commenting. So thank you, guys. Yeah, and well, some of these are actually really good. Yeah, this is a really interesting one. Like, is the author skeptic? Definitely not negating the fact. I totally agree with you there. Is there a skepticism that I think that might be an okay word, but it's not clear that the author disagrees with the conclusion. It's just the author is just saying, here's the framework we need to evaluate it. The author is certainly not taking that conclusion the environmentalists have made. Is skeptical is too strong of a word? I think we can argue, but I think that's good thinking. There's a couple from the first paragraph that I thought were really, really interesting. Hold on just a moment. Difference between and more reasons can lead to extinction, even without human activities. I'm seeing great stuff on the second paragraph, you guys. And I want to pick on somebody. This is true. The environmentalists are actually, are they? Yeah, they're suggesting immediate action. I'm going to pick on this one. The decline, if real, caused by human activity needs to be checked. What I want you to be very careful about, and I realize we're throwing things into a comment on YouTube quickly. Whose point of view is that? Whenever you think something like this, so this is off the first paragraph, I want you to think, who says that? Who says that? Does the author think it? Does the environmentalist think it? Is it unclear who thinks that? So just be careful with these kind of statements. Author's hinting that human, yeah, and I think this is fair. But I would try to take this a little bit deeper off the second paragraph, right? So hinting that the human activity may not always be the cause of extinction. Totally, 100% agree. The author's saying something a little bit deeper, though, which is, yeah, and you need to think deeply about what's really happening in that population, draw that distinction between endangered and just declining in general. All right, you guys are doing great. Let me give you another paragraph. Same drill. Tell me why this is here, whose points of view are represented, and we'll connect to the previous two paragraphs. Live group, fire with whatever thoughts you have. I'll give you about 20 more seconds. All right, you guys are doing great. This is really cool to see. I'm worried I'm going to click on the wrong one here, and I can't read them all this quickly. Another point of distinction. Yeah, awesome, my man. This is, I think, spot on. Okay, so this is a little bit more of a detailed, dense paragraph, and I think those can be dangerous. It can kind of lull your brain into going, okay, well, fact, and you kind of miss the big picture. And I think kind of the real heart to me of the author's point here in that third paragraph is kind of, it builds up, and it's kind of more in the last sentence, that anecdotal reports can't distinguish among the many possibilities. Like, that's the real essence, right? So again, I'm still not sure if we should be using the word skeptical. I think we can debate that. But the author is still kind of saying, as you try to connect this paragraph to the previous ones, I mean, these claims up here, right? So author, again, is kind of saying, well, be careful with those claims. Better still, be careful with anecdotal, we'll say, with claims and anecdotal reports. That's the heart of it. Well, why is that? Well, hey, so you've got declines and you've got extinctions that were kind of mentioned up here. And so biologists are more worried about the general decline. But even then, you can have these apparently big declines in general in the populations, and it doesn't always mean what you think it means. So the author is drawing a whole bunch of distinctions, right? So previous paragraph, it's about endangered versus declining in general. Here it's declining is most of it here, but even then, so we care more about the declines, but even then it could be something that has to do with the changed ecological context. But you still have to kind of worry about, well, maybe these are normal fluctuations or something else. So really, the author just keeps introducing nuance and says, hey, look, be careful of these claims. Be careful, because here's all of the things that complicate it. And again, what I'm seeing from the live group, awesome. I think you guys are doing a really good job for the most part here. And I'd toss more on the screen, but I don't know that's great viewing for other people. All right. One last paragraph. And yeah, same drill. Stop and say, why the author write this? How does it connect to the previous paragraphs? And then we'll get into some questions. You guys, about 20 more seconds. Live group, please fire away with whatever you got. All right. Yeah. I mean, you guys are doing great. Thank you again for this. You're nailing it. Makes me happy. Yeah, data's basically the essence here is crap. We don't have enough data. Now, what I think is a little bit, I don't know, the kind of frustrating about this paragraph or challenging about this paragraph, depending on how you want to think about it. So what's the heart of what the author's saying here is, hey, not enough data. And it's not coming. But also says, you can't just wait. So that very, very last sentence. So, hey, long-term data is not soon forthcoming. It's not coming. And postponing action while we wait may doom species and whole ecosystems to extinction. Okay, so what's going on here? How does the GMAT kind of get you in? Again, they're not out to trap you. This is how people write. This is the sort of thing you might see commentary from an academic. This is pretty normal stuff. But where I see GMAT test takers kind of run themselves aground on this question is, if at any point you stop reading systematically, you might miss that very last sentence. And I'm going to spoil the surprise here. One of the questions we're going to do in a moment, if you miss that last sentence, I know exactly which answer choice you're going to pick. And a lot of people pick that one because the whole thing is kind of set up to make you think, well, wait a minute. There's these claims made by environmentalists. And the author's kind of like, well, if those claims are real, then apparently there's this data. And the author kind of sounds skeptical. But then what does the author do? Kind of says, well, hey, here's how to evaluate these claims. Here's how to be more subtle about it. You have to draw these distinctions. Endangered versus declining. Yeah, and even then, we're more interested in the declines, but even then, kind of these reports don't necessarily mean what they think they mean. It can't just be anecdotal. Hey, but there's not enough data. And does the author disagree with the environmentalists? Not necessarily, no. The author's just saying, to be sure that the environmentalists are right, here's what we would need, and we don't have it. And again, if you at any point kind of lose your rhythm and stop being systematic and you miss that punchline, it's not even the punchline, miss that line at the very end, you might very broadly misinterpret where the author's going with it. All right. With that, here, have a question. Give you a minute or so on this. And if you're not sure about your answer, stick a question mark on it, or if you're totally lost, let me know. Okay. Yeah, this is great. Keep firing away, live group, because I'm getting a lot out of what you're picking on here. It's pretty cool. All right, primary purpose. Is it to assess the validity of a certain view? One of the things that's frustrating about these primary purpose questions, like, well, that's not interesting. Are we assessing the validity of a view? Environmentalists, they think, hey, this is an amphibian crisis. We need immediate action. And are we assessing the validity of it? Sure. Is that interesting? No. Am I going to keep answer choice A in? Yeah. Okay. I'm not excited about it. B, is it to distinguish between two phenomena? I don't know what two phenomena those are, and certainly not as a primary purpose. I guess I guess you could say decline and extinction are two phenomena, but is that the author's overall point? No, the author is trying to say, trying to evaluate this claim that we need immediate action because there's a big crisis, and is talking about all the things we would need in order to be sure that it's a real problem. But there's no two phenomena that is really at the heart of this that the author is trying to distinguish between. Identifying the causes of a problem, not at all. I mean, there's sort of, well, amphibians are in decline. Sure, is it human activity? But the passage is not about trying to find the causes. It's about how to evaluate that claim that environmentalists are making. So C is out. What about D? Describe a disturbing trend. Ooh, that's tempting. Are we describing the trend? Not at all. We're evaluating we're kind of evaluating that claim that the trend is a crisis and requires immediate action. Are we describing it? Not really at all. Trying to figure out how we would evaluate and think about that trend. Okay. I love some of this stuff coming from the live group. For what it's worth, every once in a while I run into stuff like this still. B is going to be correct 20% of the time. It's one of the easiest things for a testing agency to check on and make sure that the answer choices are evenly distributed. So yeah, B is wrong 80% of the time. I will say that. But thank you for that, because that sort of thing floats around, and a lot of people have that in their heads. And on a standardized exam like this, anytime you hear something like that, oh, D is the best answer, B is never right, E is never right, not true. Just wipe that from your head. So thank you for bringing that up. I love it. Okay, back to E. Allay concern about a particular phenomenon. If you miss that last line of the passage, you might pick E, or if you didn't fully interpret what the author was saying. The author's saying, look, we have to be really nuanced in how we evaluate this claim that we need immediate action. Does the author disagree that we need immediate action? No. The author's like, well, crap, we have no way of evaluating this anytime soon, so maybe we do need immediate action. So is the author reducing the concern? Not at all. Not at all. Do you love A? I don't love A. I think it's pretty boring. But it's right. Yeah, sure. Assessing the validity of the environmentalist view. It's exactly what we're doing for the whole time. And the author has mixed feelings on it, but that's exactly what the author's doing, is assessing that validity. All right, that's what the GMAT feels like. Good times. All right. We've got 3 more questions here. We'll go through all of those. But again, guys, if you have general questions, comments about reading comprehension, fire away. The one other thing I will say now, we are going to start up a general verbal series that's coming up in February 2026 here, if you're watching this later. Haven't done a fresh one on the GMAT Club channel in a long time. So if you want to join us for a much deeper dive on reading comprehension, critical reasoning, subscribe to this channel. Follow me on the forum. Keep an eye on the forum. Keep an eye on those banners on GMAT Club. And starting probably in about 2 weeks, we'll have a live verbal series starting up. So if you want a deeper dive and you want your questions answered live about passages, come join us for that. All right. Question 2. All right. So environmentalists, what can we infer from the passage that the author believes about those environmentalists? So A, they've wrongly chosen to focus on anecdotal reports that sounds pretty good, rather than the long-term data that are currently available. Hey, wait a minute, there's no long-term data currently available. That's what the author whines about in the fourth passage, or in the fourth paragraph. Now, notice, so again, a lot of the theme of how do you get better at reading comprehension, or how do people mess up reading comprehension? What kind of behaviors do we see all the time? Um, a lot of the time, these questions that have line references in them, and there's something highlighted or in line 5 or whatever. Um, a lot of time, what people do is they hyper focus on that piece of it, and the vast majority of the time, that's not where the answer is. The answer is here, right? The answer is in the big picture of what the author thinks. And if you just hyper focus on that chunk around that reference, you're probably going to miss something. Um, so B, the recommendations are flawed because the research focuses too narrowly on a single category of animal species. There's nothing about that. I mean, there's nothing about, hey, we're focusing just on amphibians and it's wrong because we should be focusing more broadly. The author's concerns are about the environmentalist view are almost entirely about kind of how they're going from anecdotal data and jumping to this idea that there's an immediate crisis has nothing to do with whether they're broadening it out to other species. C, this is the tempting one for most people. The certainty that population declines in general are caused by environmental degradation is not warranted. Well, does the author say that it's not warranted? Not exactly. The author is saying we don't have the data to prove it. Here's the kind of data we need. Here's a framework for thinking about it. The author never really says that it's not warranted. The author says, hey, we need more data to evaluate this. If you wanted to be conservative, you could keep it and see if there's something better. But the author is not really criticizing the environmentalist certainty exactly, just giving a framework for how to evaluate it. And the author doesn't necessarily even disagree with their conclusion in the end. The author is just saying, hey, we don't know, we can't prove this. So I would argue that C is wrong because the author would not say that last bit, that it's not warranted. So I would eliminate C for that reason. If you wanted to be conservative and keep it, you could. What about D? They have drawn premature conclusions concerning a crisis. Oh, much better, right? Because they're drawing it from recent reports of declines, and that data is not strong enough to draw this conclusion. So the author's not saying it's not warranted, but they've drawn the conclusion prematurely. This is what the author's getting after when he or she is criticizing the environmentalists. What about E? They've overestimated the effects of chance events. No, it's kind of the opposite. I mean, they're underestimating the possibility, the environmentalists are underestimating the possibility that chance events can cause extinctions. And that's small part, but it's part of the author's objection to them. So this actually kind of has it backwards, and E is out, and our winner is D. That was a tough one. Live group did great. I'm really happy. I know some of you struggled. It's hard. C is really tempting, and it's a subtle distinction between those two. All right, 2 more questions. We got about 10 minutes. I think we can get through them both. And again, if you guys have general questions, last 10 minutes here have asked me anything. So now's your chance if you got anything. All right, pause if you need to. So it can be inferred that from the passage that the author believes which of the following to be true of the amphibian extinctions that have recently been reported. So if they resulted primarily from human activities causing environmental degradation, no, that's again kind of the whole point of this is the author's really not sure. We don't have the right data to prove that for sure. Author definitely does not believe A, doesn't discount it, doesn't think it's wrong necessarily, but would not agree with that statement. B, they could probably have been prevented if timely action had been taken. Again, the author doesn't know. That's the author's whole point. Hey, given the anecdotal data we have, we just don't know. Boy, it'd be a real shame if it's going to be too late. That last sentence of the whole passage, right? Boy, it'd be a real shame if we, if we're too late to do anything about this. Maybe we are too late, but we don't know if these could have been prevented because we don't know what's causing it. So B is out, as tempting as it is for some of you. C, they should not come as a surprise because they've been declining in general for years. Not necessarily. Again, that's the author's whole point. Well, we don't know whether these are general declines, even. So if you look at that third paragraph, even when there are general declines, you don't know if those are natural fluctuations. You don't know whether those are connected to the extinctions. So definitely not C. D, they have probably been caused by a combination of chance events. Again, the author is saying that he or she doesn't know that either. So could extinctions be caused by chance events? Yeah. Could extinctions be related to general degradation? Yeah. The author's whole point is we don't have the evidence, we don't know. And I really hope we like here, this is going to get real awkward real fast. They don't clearly constitute evidence of general degradation. Yeah, that's the author's whole point. The author's not saying it is not general environmental degradation. The author's saying we don't have the evidence to show that it is general degradation. So E is our winner. Fun times. All right, we got about 6 minutes left. One last question. I think I've got one more on here. Pretty sure. Oh yeah, good. Okay, how about it? Then we'll finish up. All right. So once again, part of why I picked on this, couple things. This particular passage, so the 4 questions from this passage that we've done in this video, if you take the data on GMAT Club, what percentage of people miss a given question? All 4 of these questions were missed by between 30 and 50% of students, so that's pretty high. So these are pretty tough. But again, notice nothing technical in this language. There's nothing super hard here. Typical GMAT. It's just, did you anchor yourself in the big picture? We've got another one of those line references, right, where it's like, hey, hyper focus on that highlighted bit. No, read the highlighted bit. Okay, anecdotal reports can't distinguish among these possibilities. And there's been fluctuations in the past. Okay, well, why is that there? We did that work in the beginning, right? That's what all this is for. If you're doing this systematically, this question should be really quick for you, fairly straightforward. Why is that there? Well, it fits into the author's overall view that, hey, we do not have the data to conclusively prove the environmentalist claim. The author doesn't necessarily disagree with that claim, just saying we do not have the data. Okay. From there, again, the language isn't the most natural in these answer choices, but pretty straightforward other than that. So what's the function of it? Is it to give an example of a particular kind of study? No, not at all. We're not giving examples of anecdotal reports. That's not the point of it. Is it to cast doubt on an assertion made in the previous sentence? Well, if you read that previous sentence, not at all. That's not something the author is disagreeing with. C, and if you're not quite sure what I mean there, feel free to pause and reread that previous sentence. I don't think that one's terribly tempting for anybody. C, to raise an objection to a view presented in the first paragraph. You bet. It's objecting to the environmentalist view. Again, is the author saying the environmentalists are wrong? No, just saying here's an objection to it. We don't know if you're right. So C is looking pretty good. And again, guys, never fall in love. Take a look at D and E. What if I screwed up and misread C? Do your homework. Make sure you eliminate 4 answers, always 4 wrong answers, not 1 right one. D, to provide support for a view presented in the first paragraph. Nope, it's not supporting the view in the first paragraph. It's providing an objection to it or a qualification to it. E, to introduce an idea that will be countered in the following paragraph. Not at all. So even though at the very end of the passage, the author says, well, hey, if it really is human activity, we might be too late to save these species if we don't act. That still isn't something that contrasts this highlighted piece, right? So it is still the case that the anecdotal reports fail to distinguish among these possibilities, and the lack of data is a problem. The author still agrees with this, and it doesn't contradict that last sentence even at all. So E is out, C is right. Most of the live group did great on this one. Okay. So that is your little snapshot of how to read a long and relatively nuanced passage, how to focus on point of view. If you guys enjoyed this, as always, like, subscribe, please. Yeah, great question. And I want to make sure we end this before the hour mark. Yeah, I mean, this is the heart of it, right? So what makes this hard is the distinction between matching the gist and really getting after purpose and point of view. And apologies for mispronunciations here. Vaibhav, because I saw your comments all throughout. I think you're doing a really good job, right? I think for reading comprehension, we would not say this for critical reasoning. It's different. The approach is a little bit different. Reading comprehension, yeah, I mean, all of this is paraphrasing, but it's paraphrasing with a purpose. It's paraphrasing with some precision, because all along the way we're saying why, whose point of view is represented. From what I could tell, I thought you did that nicely throughout. And I don't think there's a lot for you to doubt in your reading, as long as you can stop at the end and go, hey, am I getting broadly to this structure of the argument that the author's made? Now with that, oh man, and I'm getting all kinds of questions. I'll go ahead and extend by a few minutes, and YouTube will not, the algorithm will not like me for doing this, but I'll keep going because now you guys are finding away some good stuff. So you are 100% on the right track. I suppose the other thing I should say here is, if you want to work on this more, we're going to work on it in the verbal series we're starting up in February, most likely starting in about 2 weeks. Join us live for those, and as we go through more passages and kind of different nuances of how they're put together, we'll get into this more. How much paraphrasing is too much? Like, what does it mean to be precise as you do that initial reading? From what I could tell, you did really well individually. This is a little bit more complicated. I think I can say 2 things here. It's such a good question. And again, if this is of interest to you, join us for more of the live sessions and the verbal series. And feel free to ask this again, because as we go through particular passages, there might be something there where we can hone in on something specific about it. I'm going to kill this passage off the screen while I finish these up. So holy grail of reading in a language that is not your native language. Ideally, you learn to read and think in that language. That is much easier said than done. And part of why I say that is really pick any 2 languages, whether they're closely related or not. And you know, I'm a native English speaker, as you guys can tell by my ridiculous American accent. I learned German. My Spanish is pretty fluent. Even those languages that are pretty closely related, German and English are very closely related in some ways. There are so many nuances to sentence structure, what a certain word means, that things often don't have perfect direct translations. So I think it's generally kind of dangerous to translate into your first language as you read. You're going to miss some nuances in doing that. Translations are almost never perfect, even in closely related languages. Now, if you speak a language that is less closely related to English, that makes it even worse, typically. That said, boy, that is one of those habits you build over a long time. And I don't think it's necessarily good GMAT advice if the way you've been reading in English for you've been doing great. I mean, that's another individual. I've seen kind of your comments throughout today. You're doing really well. Your English reading skills are strong. If you're translating into your first language and it's working for you, I think it's a big mistake for me to say, hey, stop that. And if you've been reading for however many years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it might be, in English, which is not your first language, and what you've been doing works, don't change it just for the GMAT. So very long-winded way of saying, perfect world, you kind of think in English for this. If it's working for you translating, go ahead. I wouldn't rock that boat if it works for you. And again, it looked to me like it was working for you. I would go to LSAT first. We talked about this, your question specifically about critical reasoning. We did have another episode in the series about critical reasoning, plenty of other critical reasoning videos I've done both here on GMAT Club and on the GMAT Ninja channel. In a lot of them, we talk about the LSAT. I'm a big fan of using LSAT for critical reasoning and for reading comprehension if you need extra official questions. I won't rehash all of the reasons here. You can Google our articles, GMAT Ninja, LSAT for GMAT. You'll find stuff on GMAT Club, GMAT Ninja website. So that's the best way to do it. I would do that instead of using non-official questions. See if you can get your hands on some LSATs. And some are available for free on a software called LawHub. All right. Yeah. Yes, I would do this. And sometimes the author's point of view isn't clear. But if we think in terms of, hey, the authors, what goes wrong on reading comprehension? Biggest thing that goes wrong is, broadly speaking, is you're not catching the big picture, either because you're not thinking and reading and engaging enough, or because you're focused exclusively on facts. So when we talk about process for reading comprehension, it's not a mathematical formula, right? Like, what are we trying to do? What is it that I'm trying to model or trying to get you guys to think about to be stronger at it? It's engaging in the right things at the right times and stopping at the end of every paragraph. The goal of it is to anchor yourself in the why. And I think thinking in terms of point of view is a really good tool for getting you there. Often on a more complicated passage, not necessarily a longer one, not necessarily harder, just a little more complicated, there might be 3 or 4 different points of view. And if you get those mixed up, you're going to have a really hard time on all of the questions, not just the primary purpose, but everything. Notice the 4 questions we did today. They're all anchored in the big picture. There's a line reference, but it's anchored in the big picture. So stop at the end of every paragraph and ask yourself, why did the author write this? Can I hone in on that? Can I hone in on what their point of view is, or other commentators' points of view? And that is a really good way to get yourself to understand the overall structure and the overall main purpose of the passages. So I would try to focus on that. And again, we'll do more verbal videos in the next couple of months. Come watch live if you can, and keep asking these questions. And we'll see if we can help you kind of tune that as we go through more passages together. Also, again, plenty of reading comp videos on the GMAT Ninja channel. Depends on you, depends on where you stand. I mean, I don't want you over studying 2 weeks before your exam. Like, are you gonna get better drilling tons and tons of verbal questions before your exam? At this point, you should already be performing how you want to perform on reading comp and critical reasoning. Maybe you're taking a last practice test or 2 to make sure you can apply it under test-like conditions. You should really be focused on taking care of your body and mind so that you're really sharp on test day. Those are the really important things. If you need something to keep you sharp, it's okay to do LSATs. I think they're close enough. You go from LSAT to GMAT. Generally, LSAT's more complicated language, so you switch to the GMAT, it's going to feel easier. So I'm splitting hairs here a little bit, but I think I would probably prefer if you can find some official GMAT questions. I think that's better just because you want to be doing questions that are most like the exam you're about to take. I think LSATs are amazing for training, but as you get closer, I think you want to be tuned into the GMAT style, ideally. Is it okay to use LSATs in the last 2 weeks before your exam? Yeah, I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. If you can find GMAT ones that you haven't touched, I think that's ideal. Now, ways to find those, I would grab an old edition of the official guide if you can find one, 12th edition of the official guide, 2nd edition of the little skinny verbal book. I would go there because not very many of those questions overlap the current editions. And the questions haven't changed. Reading comp critical reasoning, it was the same thing 20 years ago as it is now 25 years ago when I started teaching. So okay to do LSATs. Don't overdo anything at this stage, right? You're trying to stay sharp, not cram 100 questions in a day. But see if you can find some old official guides. Use those instead if you can. If not, LSATs are okay. No, non-official. I would be very careful with non-official questions. If it is from GMAT, if it is from LSAT, good. Official GRE, fine. These testing agencies spend thousands of dollars, literally thousands of dollars, perfecting, vetting, testing every single question. How much do you think a test prep company is spending and keeping the doors open? I can't spend $3,000 on a question and have a business. So I would say for verbal and quant, like you can do non-official questions for quant, and they're still good practice. Verbal data insights, a lot of the time, be really careful. I would say for critical reasoning and reading comp, I wouldn't use non-official questions typically, and I would just stick to official LSAT, GMAT in particular. Where were these questions in the beginning? I would have answered all these in the beginning. But thank you for this, guys. I appreciate it, and sorry to run super long. In the GMAT, how much time? Yeah, and so you will always see either 3 or 4 reading comp passages. That is a question we've asked directly to GMAT, and that is, I believe, the answer they gave us. Straight Talk with GMAT, you can watch that series if you want more of this. So you will see 3 or 4 passages on the GMAT exam, and it just depends. Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4. Every passage will have typically 3 or 4 questions on it. So there's going to be a range somewhere between 9 and 14 questions roughly. How much time should be given to a reading comp? I talked about that at the very beginning. So go rewatch that beginning because I talked about timing in there. All right. For everybody watching live, asking questions, awesome. Really enjoyed having you guys here. So thank you for that. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, et cetera, et cetera. Come see us for the verbal series coming up in a couple weeks. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have fun studying.